between the last 3 years and, of course, last winter, there were actual legitimate fears of regional blackouts. We were really actually hoping for a mild winter. That was our plan. And the fear of economic woe. We had short-term measures like the voluntary natural gas consumption reduction target and an actual mild winter that helped us avoid our worst. And we actually did have a demand reduction in natural gas as well as electricity over the winter. But has this full-on crisis actually ended? Is it over? And what we have to remember is that the energy crisis and the climate crisis are intertwined. While we do have really good news with the fact that we do have falling fossil fuel demand within the EU and some pretty considerable renewable increases as well in solar, wind, and hydro, there are a lot of points right now that show that the vulnerability of energy consumers to these price shocks, as well as really showing that there needs to be a more active role in what consumers can do in this system. So this goes in line with the European Scientific Advisory Board on Climate Change that recommends that we do many things, including reduce energy demand from the technical side, which is energy efficiency measures, as well as to change behavior, which is non-technical but very important, as well as boost electrification of end users, expand our renewable energy, and of course, not forget and provide targeted support for vulnerable consumers. Of course, within that, where do consumers live? Consumers live in buildings, and it's a really exciting new frontier to both reduce energy demand and to electrify our system further. So, as we know, residential sector is a huge potential for all of this. And again, EU needs to have a consumer-driven approach to all of these very complex aspects. While yes, again, the technical work is important, but not everybody has this lowly single-family home, and many people are renters. So we have to also think about it in terms of how can we adjust behavior and how can we incentivize the adjustment of behavior. So this is from the Covenant of Mayors. I found it very interesting, their energy savings sprint that helped last year during the first winter preparedness crisis and will continue this year. While this is all very good, and I think we need to continue this for sure, we do also need to find ways to continue to empower consumers into those further long-term strategies to meet decarbonization targets, which is why we are here today. And that's why our projects are going to say how they have gotten here. And we will start from the beginning, which is, of course, this idea of behavioral change and energy efficiency. So with that, I will give the floor to Anna Kassoling with Nudge, and then after that, Paul Liston from Evident will show their project outputs as well. So I will stop talking and give the floor to Anna.
Yes, thank you, Amanda, for the introduction and a little bit of an overview. So I'll try to explain how our project Nudge fits in there. And I guess the first question would be, okay, what exactly is a nudge? What do we mean? So nudge is essentially a small change in the decision environment that can influence behavior. That's how you would define it. But what that means is basically that it's a soft push that is meant to stimulate intuitive everyday choices. So examples could be that you get feedback on how much you consume right now, how your consumption compares to your peers, what your choices mean for CO2 emissions, or even just changing default settings. So it can be a variety of things, but the key is that we don't change the financial incentives like a tax or price cut would. It's really about rethinking intuitive everyday choices. And so in this project Nudge, we investigate how nudging can work with 5 pilots in 5 different countries, where we look at energy saving behavior broadly, but from different perspectives. So we have 2 pilots in Greece and in Portugal that focus on how nudging can decrease heating consumption. And then we have 2 pilots in Germany and Croatia that look at how nudging can help increase the self-consumption for prosumers, so households that also have their own PV system. And so these 4 pilots are kind of a group in the sense that they all use like digital tools for the delivery. So they're apps and web dashboards, and that's how they kind of get this information from the different nudges. And we test different types of nudging interventions there. And then the last pilot in Belgium, this is a little bit special because there we go to the schools and then teach children about energy saving behavior and then check whether that translates to energy savings in the parents' home. And so for all of these pilots, we collect a lot of data. Kind of at the core of it is what we call sensor data. So this would be smart meter readings where we monitor actual consumption. And then we complement it with survey data and then the data from the apps and the web portals. So that's what Nudge is all about. Basically, here's an overview of what we try to get at the project. So at a first level, kind of at the top, we ask, okay, who are these people? What is their intention, motivation? Can we somehow characterize their behavior? And then also on the delivery, how do they interact with the digital tools? How do they feel about these interfaces that we present them with? And then we apply the nudges. And so on the next step, obviously, we ask, okay, what happens when we do nudge these participants? And I talked a little bit about the individual pilots, but the common ground is somewhat, okay, what do they actually do? How much do they use these tools? And then does it change their behavior, which we try to see in these smart meter readings? And it's not obvious that this actually works because in the academic literature, there's much discussion that our intentions don't match our behavior. And then finally, we also want to look at the long term, like does nudging translate to people's new normal of behavior, or does it just go out the window when you stop sending these little nudges? And in the end, the objective is to really inform policy and try to better understand how nudging can work, in what circumstances it can work, and how we can apply these behavioral interventions. Okay. And then rather than going through a lengthy summary of the results, I will focus here on some policy relevant lessons that we learned, each with an example from the project. So the first one is the easier, the better. The less interaction a nudge requires from the user, the better it can work. So what we find is that like a nudge that just allows the user to change default settings once and then move on with their lives is our recommendation that this should be used where possible. Example would be in the German pilot, we find that on average, nudging increases self-consumption by something like 3%. But we find that for there's a default nudge where consumers can switch the setting to a smart charging mode. And then we're looking at 15% increases in self-consumption. The second point is that actually this issue of complexity, we found that there are big barriers in the technical and economic understanding that also in some cases lead to some frustration with the apps and what people see there. And if we want nudges to really shift behavior, well, then people first have to understand that decision framework where we apply the nudge. And this is a bit ironic maybe because in the Belgian pilot, we find it hard to really substantiate large effect across the entire cohort. But we kind of see that in the other pilots, there are those barriers that stand in the way of nudging to really reach everybody. And so we see education on energy literacy as kind of a groundwork that needs to be done here to really exploit the potential of nudging. And then last but not least, there's this big picture. So by definition, nudges are very subtle. So they happen within the messy reality of everyday life. So what we see in the data is that a lot of the nudging effects are overlaid by overall policy frameworks, by the energy crisis, by seasonality. So on a methods level, that means that we have to really like use the whole toolbox of statistics to try and identify what is nudging here. But to give a specific example, we also see that actually behavior can be dominated by regulatory conditions. And an example of this is the Croatian pilot, which is a bit extreme because there we have two regulatory statuses. And so if consumers produce more than they consume, very simply put, then they get to a less favorable regulatory status that has a lot of extra burden and financial disincentives. So what we see in Croatia is that people actually use these digital tools that are set up for the nudging to monitor their regulatory status and stay within the limits. And so in this case, the nudging objectives and the regulatory incentives are misaligned, but this can also be a lesson that perhaps nudging is less an alternative to financial incentives, but it could be a complement. And it's important to align these and connect financial and non-financial incentives to get positive reinforcement. So that's it. We're still in the process of finalizing the results, and you can follow all the progress on the project website, nudge.eu. So that's it from my side.
Great. Thank you so much. I think that was very insightful and in a very short time. So thank you so much. And Paul with Evident, I'll let you have the floor next.
Good morning. Thank you, Amanda. And thanks to the sister projects for inviting us as Evident to talk about our project. And similarly, like we're working in the same area, so we're going to touch on some things that that Anna has already talked about, but I'll try to keep the focus a little bit different for the listeners. So I am a psychologist. I work in Trinity College in Dublin, and we are one of the consortium members of the Evident project, and I'm representing it here today. We have 9 partners, 3 universities, 2 research centres, 2 SMEs and 2 energy providers within the consortium. And we have a number of different objectives within the project, but similarly to Nudge, we're working in the same space. It's about behavioural change and energy efficiency. And we also have 5 use cases. I'm not going to go into detail about them. So we've got use cases, you've got pilot studies. They're looking at the same things, and what's interesting for me is listening to what Nudge is coming out with, and we're in the same stage of analyzing our data and finding what our actual conclusive results are. There's a lot of similarities and a lot of overlap, which is good. It just means that with different studies, we're confirming the same kind of results. So the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about what we're trying to do as a project. So on the right-hand side, you can see an image there where, like Anna was talking about, there's a lot of misaligned, kind of imperfect realities of how things work in the kind of energy ecosystem for consumers. So we've got climate change, we've got unstructured information, we've got general policy measures, we've got energy security concerns, all these kinds of things. As Evident, we want to create a new ecosystem that allows all the stakeholders to better, to perform better in terms of energy efficiency. So obviously consumers, but also scientists. And one of the key things is that we provide our data set to a platform that we have that other scientists can examine our results. But our premise is that people are well-intentioned and want to use less energy. So one of our use cases is a serious game. And we did a lot of usability and acceptability kind of testing just in terms of getting our use case up and running. And some of the comments that we got back from people are there in the middle. You can see them. So people are saying things like, if I'm constantly working to survive, the last thing I'm thinking about is my energy consumption, which might be a little bit counterintuitive, because if you're struggling to survive and money is an issue, one would have thought that energy efficiency would help you. But that's not the case. That's not how people perceive it, at least. Another comment maybe provides an explanation for that is that the social responsibility of energy efficiency and energy behavior keeps getting put on the people who can't afford to have these conversations, or on the people that don't have time to have these conversations. So in that last clause of the sentence, there is an acknowledgement that, yes, these are conversations that we should be having. I want to have them. I don't have time for them. Like Anna talked about, messy life. I mean, people are making energy decisions with everything else that's going on in their particular life. So bad day at work, made unemployed, partner doesn't have a good job, kids not happy, parent elderly in hospital, somebody died, all these things, your fridge breaks, right? So you're making energy efficient. You're not doing it on a Thursday when you've got a half a day off work and you can decide which is the best fridge to get for yourself. So that's what we were trying to replicate in our serious game and in some of our studies. So we know that consumers are getting frustrated. They want to translate their intentions or their attitudes into behaviors, but oftentimes when they go to do that, the market is consuming for them. So we're trying to investigate that, to try and make people and to try and allow them to make the decisions they want to make. Not moralistic decisions that everybody needs to behave in the most energy efficient way as possible. So we need to be careful about that. But people have freedom, but we know that they're well-intentioned and want to use less energy. So the next slide. Some of our initial findings from our use cases, and these are initial findings, we're still finalizing this. And obviously the final output of the project is oriented towards having policy guidelines and implications, and we have a partner, we have JRC on board, so we're ideally positioned for that. But in terms of, we also used in one of our use cases, we used nudges, and we found a 10% reduction in electricity consumption amongst prosumers in a use case in Sweden. There is a seasonal pattern, so most reduction taking place during spring and summer, and there are intraday changes in electricity consumption too. So it's interesting that we found that's working. And then in some of the use cases the TCD is responsible for, where we were looking at, we did a survey with over 2,000 respondents, and we also have the serious game, which is looking at the kind of split incentive issue between renters and landlords, let's say, about appliance choice. And we thought that was super topical before Ukraine. But the respondents with high financial literacy and high environmental literacy, they made more energy efficient choices with regards to intention to purchase appliances, obviously. And I think two interesting take-homes are regarding those financial literacy and environmental literacy measures. And we found that for financial literacy, the under 30s had a much lower rate compared to those that are over 40. And that possibly makes sense. In the sense that they are maybe less accustomed to budgeting and financing and managing household expenses. But conversely, for environmental literacy, the under 30s had a higher rate of environmental literacy compared to the over 40s. So I think there are implications there if we want to tease them out in terms of, I think particularly, obviously education is hugely important and not just looking at that in one of its pilot cases, but I think maybe we need in a policy kind of aspect as a society to look at how we can help more elderly consumers to make more energy efficient decisions. So one of the things we're hearing is that they don't have as many stressors on their finances. So maybe saving some money for energy efficiency isn't as big of a concern for them. So they're happier or more willing to behave in less energy efficient ways. So the last slide. Just to acknowledge, I mean, one of the things that we're coming out with as analysis is the kind of that we need to look at this in a very holistic way. And if we want to make consumers to more easily make energy decisions that they want to do, we also need to acknowledge that we need to shape informed consumers. So the responsibility for this lies with all stakeholders, with governments about their policies. Okay, with energy providers in terms of the information they provide you with bills and how much it costs, in education. So obviously with our younger society members, but also with our older, retailers, regulators, society in general, and the media, and repair and maintenance providers and consumer groups. So a lot of times when people have a broken appliance and they want to buy a more energy efficient appliance, they're often told when they contact repair and maintenance providers that it's just easier to get a new one. So even if you want to repair your appliance, and even if it's covered by law, the system is imperfect and it's not working the way it should. So we need all stakeholders to be considered if we want.
Sorry to interrupt, but so that we have time for the panelists, I think we'll kind of keep going to the next projects, but it was really helpful. And I think that we can see already that Nudge and Evident really complement each other, and it's really good to see that both research projects are finding similar things, but especially to hear about the behavioral pieces of kind of furthering these changes. It's really great. So thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. And then we will move on, kind of going from behavioral change and energy efficiency. We'll also kind of look at an aspect which is demand flexibility options. So in the Y project, one of the pieces that was kind of investigated is this peak shaving aspect and how demand response can go into that. So Cruz.
Hello, do you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so let's go. So yeah, I am Cruz Borges, the project coordinator of WAP project. Yeah, the idea for the WAP project is that we are going to try to make some sort of improving the behavioral models, especially on households, in order to then later on to trying to implement them into energy system models. So we go through this kind of line. So first, we improve the energy behavioral models. Then we are going to make models for energy services, let's say in the house. Then we are going to make a step for scaling, and the late one is to introduce those kind of model in energy system models. Okay, so what we are going to talk today is several examples and several experience, several natural experiment that we have carried out in order to try to understand what are the impact of a change in the tariff system into the behavior of people and how these affect other things into the energy system. So the two main questions that we have asked previous slide is, can a change of the energy tariff reduce the energy consumption or change the demand from peak to non-peak, let's say? And then we wanted to know which are the groups that are more have more impact for those measures. Impact in whole sense, not only what are the ones that have changing most their behavior, but also the reasons for them to change their behavior so much or so less, okay? So we wanted to understand better what is happening there, what are the barriers, and what are the impact, okay? Because, well, later on we can see a couple of examples. So what we have done, in Spain, almost half of the population have a fixed rate tariff. I mean, half of the population is in the regulated tariff. This one is a price signal, okay? But the other half has a traditional fixed rate, okay? In June, 2 years before, the Spanish government changed the regulated part of the tariff that affect to everyone. It's the taxes, let's say, for the tariff, electricity tariff. A lot of companies take the opportunity of this change to create a kind of youth tariff for the entire population, let's say, targeted to the whole population. That is kind of on the middle ground between the price signal that was the regulated tariff and the fixed price that has the, let's say, non-regulated market, okay? So the first step that we have assessed was this change from fixed tariff to a time of use tariff. That, well, the objective is the traditional one, trying to provide a price signal, let's say, but with fixed periods in order to foster the use of the energy in the more, well, at nights. That was when this tariff was designed, it was the cheaper, let's say, more congested period of time in the network, okay, and trying to foster this kind of demand shift, okay. But later on, after the war in Ukraine and the increases of the prices, the government has introduced the gas cap. This is a mechanism that cap the price of the gas and then redistribute the cost among all the stakeholders, let's say, in the value chain. This make every tariff in Spain a price signal, because the price of your tariff, wherever you are in a fixed price in time of use or in a regulated market, now has a component that is directly linked to the use of gas in the energy system. And this changes everything. It makes a price signal, and it's changed the periods that are more expensive and less expensive in the system. Okay, so we assess also this change. What has we seen? What we have saw is that both tariffs have produced a change of behavior, a large change of behavior. Let's say, I mean, and it was quite focused. I mean, they have changed the appliance they use. They have changed the hours they make the laundry. I mean, the washing machine, the dishwasher, and these kind of things. And the price signal, let's say the gas cap, has also changed, a huge change in the thermostat. They have switched off or changed the value of the temperature. This is the first result that we have found. In the next slide. And what we have seen, but this is not here, is that there was large differences between groups. I mean, groups with a financial burden has changed more the behavior that groups of people that don't have so much burden, economic burden. Okay. In any case, the key takeaway was that both tariffs trigger a behavioral change, both in demand reduction and also in removing energy from peak to non-peak. Okay, the same barriers apply in both tariffs. Okay, but we need to take care, because what we have found is that the price signal, it's not correctly understood. I mean, people understood correctly the time of use. I mean, they have applied the correct measure and they have changed the behavior and this kind of thing. But when we ask for the price signal, they say, what the hell is a price signal? What the hell is happening here? I mean, they have not completely understood these kind of things. And as such, people have adapted better to the time of use than to the price signal. But we have a confounded here, but the price signal has reduced the energy consumption, but it's not because the price signal, is because the large increase of the energy prices during this period, let's say. Yeah, what we are trying to recommend that we wanted to, if you wanted to implement this kind of tariff in your system, you need to make sure that you make a communication campaign beforehand, trying to explain clearly and for everyone why you are doing this and what are the impact, and trying to foster and providing them as much tool as you can in order for them to adapt. And even in those cases, you are going to have large impact on different consumer stakeholders. I mean, the people that don't have too many financial burden probably is going to ignore you. They are going to continue doing whatever they are doing. And the people that are with financial burden, they are going to follow you, your price signal. But this is going to have an impact on their, not only in their behavior, but also in their quality of life. That's it. I think that this is the last slide.
Great, thank you so much. Yeah, it was a very interesting little case study. Of course, it's nice to have this national look at how policy and market mechanisms can also, it's chicken or the egg, and it's nice to have this aspect as well, which actually feeds in really well with the idea of new trends, what they'll present, which is on both consumer energy sharing, and I have the word prosumership here, but we will learn very quickly that it's actually prosumerage. So with that, yes. Great, yes, Philip, please.
Thank you, Amanda, for the introduction. I will shortly introduce the New Trends project, which focuses on new trends in energy demand modeling, actually. And yeah, go to the next slide. The overall aim of the project is to develop an analytical basis for 2050 scenarios in energy efficiency, taking into account new societal trends, and to try to better understand these trends and how these trends, by including them in our modeling activities, how they can impact future energy demand. And one of these trends that we were specifically looking at is the trend of switching from consumer or being a prosumer in the residential building, to prosumager. And what we mean by prosumager is a household that does not only produce and consume energy, but also manages its energy consumption. And different to the presentations before, we're not looking at the behavioral change, but rather we're looking at how single buildings can shift their electricity load or their energy demand through an external signal, for example, a price signal. And we focus mainly on the heating and cooling aspect. So buildings can shift energy demand by turning up electrical boilers or heat pumps more in times of low prices, and then low energy demand times of high prices. And we used this approach on two of our building stock energy demand models. One of them calculates the hourly electricity consumption of consumers and prosumagers over 1 year. So we have the direct comparison on the consumption patterns on an hourly basis. And the other model simulates the investment decision of consumers and prosumagers until 2050 and here. So here we get insights on investment decisions. How are they different from prosumagers compared to normal consumers, and what are key aspects to reach our energy or energy efficiency targets or decarbonization targets. If you go to the next slide. On the left side, you see a map of the EU 27, where we show how much percentage of the electricity that buildings with electrified heating systems can shift on a yearly basis. And we found that variable electricity tariffs can be an effective tool to incentivize load shifting through the building stock. The potential is quite big. However, peak demand can be higher, so it is crucial that the price or whatever signal is being used to incentivize the heat pump to shift load or heat pump electrical heating system has to reflect local energy scarcity or transportation, in the electricity distribution, transportation, and generation. Heat pumps are a cost-effective decarbonization measure and can play a vital role in the flexibility option. However, to ensure a clean energy transition, it's crucial that we have subsidies for low-income households. Otherwise, they won't have the chance to jump on this prosumager train, for example. Also, heat pumps prove to be even more cost-effective when they have this option to be flexible. So, and that's already it from my side. Thank you very much for your attention.
Great, thank you so much. So I hope that from this perspective, it gives you an idea of the fact that we are all sister projects, but we also are tackling things in the research realm in a little bit different way, but finding very complementary findings, which is very interesting. But of course, we also wanted to talk to some external panelists about all of this interesting and complex world of empowering consumer energy saving and sharing. And for this, I will briefly introduce our panelists. So first of all, we have Antonin Chapollot, and he is the Policy and Advocacy Advisor for the Coalition for Energy Savings, a European nonprofit association striving to make energy efficiency and savings the first consideration of energy policies. Then we have Roland Tuel. He is a project manager at Rescoop, the European Federation of Citizen Energy Cooperatives, and they are representing over 1.25 million citizens. And finally, we have Pablo Vasquez Martin, and he's a smart grid engineer at Cuerva Energía, a Spanish distribution system operator, and he's also the technical lead for research and development there. So I will stop sharing, and we will have our panelists on spotlight, hopefully, for everyone. Let's see. Okay. So for first things first, we had a very comprehensive deep dive. I know it may be a little longer than we intended, but I'm wondering from your perspectives, what are your first impressions of the pitches that our research project shared? And in that way, also, what are some aspects that are relevant to your work? Who would like to go first?
I'm happy to start to break the ice. So hello, everyone. So as Amanda said, I'm Antonin Chapelot from the Coalition for Energy Savings. Very happy to be here. Of course, out of the 4 projects presented, the Nudge and Evident project is a bit closer to home for the Coalition. This, for us, really, well, for me, hearing the presentation, what really struck a nerve is the impression that definitely there is behavioral change, but this behavioral change is difficult, need time, and it's not entirely sure that it will be long lasting as well from the Nudge and the Evident project. I think there was a sentence by Anne, which I really liked, which was intention don't match the behavior, which is not good in itself, but summarized quite well what often is problematic with behavior and change when it comes to energy consumption, especially in the residential sector, so for people at home. I think also my main takeaway, which is something that I knew before, but it's even better when it's supported by concrete studies and concrete experiences on the ground, is that really changing behavior, especially using energy consumption at home, is as said, a holistic way. It's not only basically the work of an energy savings campaign that needs to be done because we're going to have a difficult winter ahead of us. It's not necessarily something which is short term that people will embark on without any other help or any other support, and you might actually have a positive effect, which is what also was presented in the part of the Evident project from Paul, which was that most people will say, well, this is not my priority, I don't have time to take care of this, and it could even kind of push further away some 2 different parts of society, people that have time to take care of this and people that don't. So really, I mean, at the Coalition, we're pushing to really see energy consumption from a holistic way and push energy savings, not only through awareness campaigns, but through financial support, for technical support, for help also to make energy efficiency benefits more understandable by everyone. And that we can come back to it in a moment, is really, there's also a difference between energy efficiency improvements and energy savings related from behavioral change, which also has different implication in the way you push for them. For example, if you want to renovate your building, it might be also quite good to do it through a financial and technical support. If you want to have more case-by-case behavioral change, then it can also be done through rather awareness measures, educational programs, things like this, that also go a little bit through the day-to-day activities and not only the one-time renovation measure, for instance. So that's it from my side for the moment. It was a very interesting presentation overall, so thank you for that.
Great, thanks so much. Yes, who would like to add to that?
Maybe me.
Okay, perfect.
So first of all, thank you for all the people that present the project. Is quite interesting. So as my view as a worker in DSO, it's like we are not so near to the people, to the final user. So this kind of project is really a good push to do that, because we can, it's true that we see that the people, okay, as they told in the Y project, is like, okay, they understand that they can have a tariff benefit with the time of use tariff, but they don't really understand the price signals and that sort of thing. So the other projects like the Evident or maybe Nudge can reach that the lack of knowledge through these kind of apps, these kind of maybe work with the final user, the kids in the schools that transmit the knowledge and to the parent. That is, for me, is like a quite good point about that. So when we work with energy communities, future aggregator and that sort of thing is really complicated to reach the people due to our technical view of the energy. We don't have really the user view of the energy. So this combination of projects is like a really good tool to address and engage the people. And also joining with our work, that is, we need to digitalize the grid. So we want to more and more data every day, so we can integrate in this kind of projects, in this kind of tools, in order to give services to the final user and also engage them. So this is my view about these projects. Really interesting.
Great, thank you. And I think that both these aspects get tied in very well when it comes to the world of energy cooperatives and energy communities. So perhaps there's something there.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed, it does. If I can react. For me, there's a lot of things, a lot of very interesting topics that have been addressed in different manners. First, the role of new technology, of course, is super important, but you see that it never comes by itself. So yeah, I appreciated the fact with the role of default settings, the role of automation that is of course needed if you want people to embed this new behavior into their daily lives, because you don't want to be behind your devices all the time. But this comes with a limit, and you can see that you need information, you need support, you need different triggers. And I like the fact that it was somebody insisted on the different profiles, financial literacy versus environmental literacy. There are different triggers that move different categories of people. I think this is super important. And what I also remarked is that in at least two out of these four projects, you have cooperatives involved, and it seems that cooperatives are still very much appreciated partners when it comes to be close to your consumers and pass on some innovative ideas. And I think the energy transition is in the need of this kind of trusted partners to accompany change, but also because it was very obvious with the Y project, where you could see how the different behavior were really studied. You're very happy when it's your local community, your local cooperative doing this. Would you be as happy if it was one of the GAFAM company doing the same? That's a big question. And the last thing, still, two last comments. Being tailored, also, I think the limit of technological approach is to think that energy transition is a technology issue. First, it's not, and if you think so, you will lose a huge part of your audience, including from a gender perspective. And last thing is about the mention of energy poverty. We're shifting in an energy sector that was central monopolies driven by the public sector to decentralized and driven by the private sector. And in a market system, there is no, one of the first measure was to remove the social tariffs, but you don't remove the issue of energy poverty by removing social tariffs, of course. And I appreciated the blunt message that you need subsidies to address this. There's still a need for public support for energy poverty, of course.
Great, thank you. Yes,
For
this
sure.
is
Just
yeah.
one point, Roland, it's really a good point. I think that the energy transition is not only a technical issue, because the technical part is also, we can say, not solved, but it's quite advanced. And as my work and the work of my partners is always the main point is the social part of the projects, because we need to engage the people, and it's really hard part of the project. So yeah, that's the point. It's not the technical issues, because we have the technology, we have the algorithms, we have that sort of things. Really, and it's working fine and slowly, but the social part is always the hardest.
Yes, absolutely. And I think from this kind of place, of course, we can absolutely discuss more about the challenges, but I think that at least from a high level, it was already discussed. But I'm curious from your diverse perspectives, if there's anything from the, as we mentioned in the beginning, turbulent last 3 years, from the standpoint of energy savings or energy sharing, that was really very effective or ineffective, both regulatory or practically, that maybe people don't even know about, that you could share? Or if I were to maybe rephrase this, if there was something maybe from your work, from more of a behavioral element of consumer work, that you could highlight for our audience.
I can again start maybe on the part of energy savings. I think for us, the last, I would say rather 1.5 years, because of course COVID had played an impact, but maybe not so much as the energy crisis and the invasion of Ukraine. We really had a short highlight on energy savings. Energy efficiency was known, it was discussed, maybe not enough, and not enough progress was made, definitely. But really you had a focus on short-term energy savings because you had a couple of months to prepare for next winter. You had to save energy quickly, and you had to make people understand that the next winter will be difficult and that energy savings will be necessary. So that's at EU level. So you had different, of course, reaction from different level of governments. At EU level, we had Repower EU that both focused on short-term energy savings, trying to push to reduce energy consumption as fast as possible to prepare for next winter. Also directly linked to the gas consumption goal that you mentioned in the introduction, Amanda. But there's also, and that's maybe more of a long-term perspective, which we of course very much supported from the coalition, there was a raising of the energy efficient target for 2030 within Repower EU that allowed also to have a better deal and a better target when it came to the energy efficiency directive revision. So that was good because it provided a complementary approach from short-term to longer term. But of course, when it gets to the very, let's say, detail of the energy savings action that the Commission, also with the support of the IEA, was proposing, it was very, as we call it, very behavioral change, reducing thermostats, reducing speed on highway, for instance. And those, of course, were needed to prepare for the next winter, but it also should have been more accelerate building renovation, really a switch from to an electrical car. So really longer term actions and decisions that will permanently reduce energy consumption, because of course we have longer term goals in terms of that. On the national and the individual level, you had also different type of measures, both regulatory and more, let's say, implicit to push people to reduce energy consumption. But again, as you said in the introduction, I think we reach our gas reduction consumption goal in the winter of 2022, but the part of which was from the part of a mild winter, which was the part of a diversification of supply from LNG terminals, for instance, which was also a reduction of consumption because of energy poverty, energy rationing, and which was of, let's say, happy energy savings measure that you are willing to take, is also very debatable and depends from one country to another, from one household to another. So my main message here is not because we reached the goal that we reduce gas consumption at the level, which is of course good because it allowed us to also pass the winter. It should not be a full victory because it might have been also partly due to bad consequences for people. So that's, and of course this could have been lowered in terms of the impact it had if energy efficiency improvement happened before, because of course energy consumption would have been structurally reduced from the previous years. So again, a lot happened to put energy savings on the map, but we really need to focus on longer term savings than short term, because we might have a problematic winter in next couple of weeks, couple of months.
Exactly. Very well said. Great. Yes, from the side of energy sharing or
I could
prosumers?
comment on energy sharing, and I'll tease Pablo also on DSOs. First, a quick word on savings. It's not too much my area, but I think what is interesting in this period of time is that while we've seen the concept of energy community like thriving, in particular around self-consumption and collective self-consumption, it's noticeable that what popped up during this period is the concept of citizen-led renovation. So activities related to renovation, but led by communities, by citizens in a similar manner, by energy communities. So there's like it looks like there is also an appetite for this alternative to the full market approach that has been the one of the European Union until a recent past. On energy sharing, it's quite interesting to see the shift between the debates of the clean energy package, where energy sharing was really labeled like an activity for the wealthiest that could afford sophisticated equipment, and that could threaten also the solidarity of the grid, of the copper plate, to suddenly, when the prices got crazy, like an alternative to protect the consumers from the market prices, and potentially also to provide support to energy poverty, in terms of energy poverty, and a real need to implement it and to provide like the more practical tools for implementing it. In that regard, the DSOs changed approach also, and they were very part of the first side of the story during the legislation, but also, I mean, for fears that I completely understand that needed to be clarified. But the look they have at things now is interesting, to the extent also DSO has understood that it could be a solution, not in all countries, but in countries where you have the most congestion, and it's pretty striking in the Netherlands, for instance, where there's a huge work with our colleagues in the Netherlands and the DSOs Association on the concept of local for local, trying to get as much energy produced locally, consumed locally, so they can alleviate the network that is red everywhere there. So happy to pass on to Pablo and to see if he has any reaction on this.
Yeah, sure. I'm completely with you, because, for example, here in Spain, maybe in other countries in the European Union, it's more advanced in terms of maybe recognizes the aggregator, more advanced in energy communities, in legislation. But here in Spain, we are seeing right now that needed change, because now it's when they allow to change the law, the operational procedures, producers, and also changing the way that the energy needs to be consumed. And also they are prioritizing the locally energy consumption. So, but this is for DSOs, for sure we want to address these reductions and this new clean energy thing and that sort of things. But for example, the integration of prosumers, the integration of, for example, peer-to-peer energy sharing, and that's all of these technologies produce also a challenge in the energy distribution. The energy system is not thinking initially to work in this way. So we need also the change in the legislation in order to integrate the final user, integrate the energy communities, integrate the aggregators, in order to create a common solution for all of us, in order to reach the final energy reductions. And that's all. So, Roland, your point is quite accurate right now.
I'm curious, Pablo, are there any, since you are working kind of in the R&D side, are there any projects that are kind of working on this furthering of coordination between, of course, like the energy system is right now at
Yeah.
least very hierarchical, but are there kind of services that are
Yeah, for
that
sure.
you're working on?
In the last year, the government introduced the sandbox, the option to present a sandbox. So it's a really, really good point in order to create a legislation in a certain point of the country in order to prove all these changes, to prove all this technology, to prove the reach to the final user. So that's the main point here in order to integrate the aggregation and the flexibility in the market, because for example here in Spain we don't have any flexibility market defined right now, and also the figure of the aggregator is, let's say, in the air because it's not quite well defined right now. It's not, let's say, useful. You don't have the flexibility market, so why do you need that an aggregator? But we are working right now in point. That's the main project we have in our heads right now.
Right. Yeah, I think it's very relevant. And it's nice because I think from some of our work, right, we're looking from this EU lens, which is, it's very helpful and it does kind of bring the beginnings of things. But then, of course, the national transpositions of things really do show how it works in more smaller scale contexts. So it's nice to hear that there's also research happening from more of a national regional level. Great. From kind of to continue this thought, also being aware of time, if there's anything quickly that either Antonin or Roland can share, are there any either collaborative measures to kind of that you know of, either that are happening on the ground right now that are kind of nice best practices to share, or that are like future potential measures that could kind of also bridge this gap for energy sharing with peers, or yeah, like continuing energy savings beyond what we mentioned. And if not, that's okay too.
Antonin, you want to go?
No, I was about to suggest citizen-led renovation that you mentioned.
Okay, promote citizen-led renovation. That's great.
So maybe I can let you. No problem.
Okay, but don't forget about citizen-led renovation. What I wanted to highlight first, when you said, I'm a bit, I don't know, uncomfortable when we say collaborative aspects, measures between consumers and retailers, because what we've seen recently is very uncollaborative behaviors of incumbent players when like we've seen the limits of the market approach. It works very well when there's a lot of energy and you can trade easily, but when prices are suddenly surging, like there's a lot of people, so prices went or passed on to consumers sometimes earlier than the contracts would have allowed, and we've seen a lot of people that were a bit lost in this context of so the professional, and some of them went bust, but of course the end users with skyrocketing prices. Interestingly enough, for some of our members, depending on the business models, and not all cooperatives are the same, but in Belgium, it was very striking that it's been a somehow good period because the existing cooperatives, they cover their production, their yearly production, or they cover their yearly consumption with production, with renewable production. So they suddenly were very cheaper than the market, because as a consumer, as a member of the cooperative, you own a share, and you're both shareholder and end user. So it's not that you get more dividend, but you get a cheaper price, and it's an arbitration that is made in the cooperative. And in south of Belgium, the Cositer cooperative, which was struggling for years to gather enough members to consume the energy they produced, in few months they filled up their contact their member list. So really this model like prove also that maybe in time of very tight resources, like the sharing and the democratic model works good also.
Great, yeah, and thank you for kind of clarifying that exactly, like the collaborative measures with the market as is it is difficult, and I agree that we are seeing that now, where there's kind of a push-pull happening. For the sake of time, I mean, I'd love to continue chatting, but I have one last question so that we can get to our Q&A with our lovely participants. What are some essential next steps? And this doesn't have to be, from this high level EU. It could be from the EU, national, regional, even local level, to enable more consumer energy saving and sharing measures.
So I can already start, and I'm gonna actually take a national EU perspective, because of course we are EU stakeholder. For us, really the big next step is the revision of the national energy and climate plans that are coming up. We had a deadline for the draft plan in the 30th of June, last 30th of June, and then we'll have a final plan by the 30th of June 2024. And really, this is the moment where each member state are actually putting forward measures to fulfill the new EU goals regarding all dimensions of the energy union, so decarbonization, internal energy market, energy security, but of course as well for us, energy efficiency. So this is really the moment when they could put forward measures to have structural energy efficiency improvement, but they can also put forward measures to push behavior change, push energy savings action, to take that holistic perspective that Paul was mentioning in the introduction through specific measures that they can introduce. And of course, at the coalition, we're looking at those plans in great detail, and we really would like that's a long-term and very well explained, well planned, and then of course well implemented measures are proposed, so that we make sure that we accelerate energy savings next years, but also until all the potential is filled in terms of energy savings.
Okay, thank you. Who would like to go next?
I can do a comment. So it's related with that what I say earlier is really focused on the sandbox part, because here in Spain we have some associations like ETRA for aggregation and flexibility that unites not only DSOs, also the whole value chain of the energy aggregators, energy communities, to promote that operational procedure changes and new ones in order to address the integration of the more clean energy in the grid. That is for sure, it's good for all, also for us. And that is one main focus and one effort that we think that can bring a really big change in the game. So that's the main point. But also we are working EU proposals, EU projects, in order to bring all the new technology, the new approaches that we see in Europe, in order to bring it here to Spain, in order to integrate it in the system. So that are our main focus.
Perfect, great, thank you.
If I can complement regarding energy sharing, maybe.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, I've been working with something like 7 cooperatives on an ongoing project that is called RESCOP VPP, and where we've seen that many of our members are already thinking about the business model. They are implementing various business models related to the use of innovative services, including energy sharing. And really what's needed is first the implementation of existing measures, because there's a old framework in the clean energy package, but is hardly implemented in the field. And this goes until the secondary regulation, and also how DSOs, for instance, deal with these new activities. it implies quite some changes, quite some adaptation in terms of data processing. So it's a challenge for the field operators, and it takes time. So these adaptations are needed, but again, like there are local actors that are getting ready, and some that could be reached out also in the sense that the information to local players, to the local relays on the ground is usually missing. There's no clarity both for end users and for the SME sector about how to make these new services happen. So information is very much needed. But in terms of just one thing, when we say what kind of changes are needed for the energy transition, again, I've been referring to legal and technology issues, but I think that's not the main aspect. I'm still very uncomfortable to use the term of transition, because basically we have to realize how big is the challenge. It's something that is unprecedented in the story of humanity. There are no energy transition in the past. We've just been consuming more and more, and suddenly we have to consume less and to get rid of some resources. We've never consumed as much coal as today. We've never consumed as much wood as today, and so on and so forth. So if we need to get rid of all of this, it's unprecedented. And sometimes I feel that maybe a broader discussion, a broader societal discussion on this is a bit missing. But I just wanted to make the point. I realize we'll have a hard time to discuss this huge philosophical issue right here, right now.
Yes, thank you. But it is very, very important to say exactly, like, to make this this topic even bigger and more important. But exactly. So for those in the audience, so you can feel free to raise your hand. This is our Q&A portion. I realize that we're a little behind, but if you have questions, we're really happy to take them. This is from either questions about the projects that we saw in the beginning, or based on our panel discussion, or if there's any aspects that you would like discuss that we haven't covered. Feel free to raise your hand, or if you're feeling a little shy, you can also ask in the chat. In the meantime, I will ask our panelists, do you think that, so of course we don't have a representative of a regional energy agency or municipality in the panel, but what are some potential, in this way, I do think they are actually collaborative elements, like enabling factors to help really get the consumers / at that point citizens of their area on board with either energy savings or energy sharing, which is a bit more complex, of course, but to have this kind of mediator in the middle. Of course, from our research, it says that it's very, very good. We're wondering practically from your standpoint, how important in the future for these goals is municipal or energy agency collaboration? Whomever. I'm riffing now.
we all unmuted at the same time, so I'm not sure who's first. No, but just a quick point on my side. I think in the future, the local aspect is really crucial, because as was mentioned in the Nudge or Evident project, you need also decisions and push towards energy savings, which is close to heart, which is in your neighborhood, people around you, how they're consuming energy. Are they consuming less? Are the savings on bills? And they have pretty much the same apartment as you have, for instance. So if you do that kind of raising awareness, but in local context, I think you have a bit more chance that those actions are taken rather than an official statement from the government saying, please save energy. I think it's probably on really the citizen side, it's something that might also, taking, for example, myself as a citizen, that's something that would touch me more than a general awareness raising campaign, for instance.
Yeah, I think there's also that trust element, right? That's a little bit closer. Pablo?
Yeah, it's quite challenging question for me, because I work in a DSO, and it's not really the best company to reach the final user. I mean, we also is they are seeing us like okay, you are billing me, or any other company are billing me, so why are you trying to address me in order to reduce my energy consumption? The final user thinks, okay, if I consume more energy, I will pay more. So you have an edge. But yeah, really, we need those actors like for example, municipalities in small places or villages and that sort of things, in order to understand that it's a benefit for both parts of the game. So municipalities or maybe agencies, the communication agencies or something like that, in order to make a bridge between the companies in this kind. I'm talking about Spain. That is the one I know. The bridge between companies and the final user. So,
Okay.
and it's not quite defined who is in charge of that here, for example.
Definitely. Yeah, it's complex and I'm sure at some places confusing. Definitely.
Yeah.
Thanks. Brother?
If I can complement on that, I think like there's a strong role for local authorities, especially in the context of decentralization of the energy system. Most energy resources are now localized, and I think there is a role both in terms of strict urbanism to organize where energy infrastructure can be implemented, and to maybe even more organize a debate around this. And next step is also to be part or to support community initiatives in that sector. To the extent we see an appetite for this alternative approach, as I mentioned earlier on. Especially in Eastern Europe, the concept of cooperative is not super popular because they have a bit of a traumatic past with this with this concept. But still, there is also some need or some willingness to organize at local level and to work with their at a more neighborhood level. And really, municipalities are really the trusted partner and the appointed actor to lead this effort. So this is something we see, but still important to highlight that there's still a strong need for also member states, governments, like national policies around this. First, to guarantee like the solidarity in the energy sector, to avoid the competition of territories one against the other. This would be, I think, very not beneficial for end users, and also to address the energy poverty aspect of things. This is part of solidarity, but still, I think I want to highlight this, that we've got rid of some safeguard, and it's important that still something remains in place.
Great, thank you so much for that. I think that I think I forgot to mention this in our recent questions, but I think that exactly this is a very important glue for many aspects. And I'm curious, maybe if somebody from the audience, how maybe even not a question, but if you wanted to maybe share your perspectives, I'm asking into the ether. Maybe you're from from either the municipality standpoint, or if you have anything to say. We like talking, but we also want a Q&A. Okay, yeah, or somebody from Eastern Europe. We made a big claim. Okay. Great. I'm trying to think if there's any. Yes.
If there is a need for a Q&A, I can ask a question. I don't know if Anne and Paul are still here, about the Nudge or Evident project, actually more the Nudge project. I was very curious about, because this is always the very problematic methodological hurdle, which is how to differentiate between what you're trying to see, what has the consequences, and other aspects of that daily life that has also an impact. So I don't know, in the nudge project, you referred to it in your presentation, but how do you differentiate between the nudge impact and I don't know, and also I don't know the timeline of the project, because of course if it was between August 2022 and March 2023, also there might have been also some other consequences and influences on the energy consumption. So I don't know how this was taken into account while trying to figure out the result of the nudge element per se.
Yeah, for sure. That was a difficult part for trying to come up with like the causal effect of the nudges, which is what an academic would call this, like trying to establish that there's not just a correlation, it could be anything, but really to say, okay, A causes B, the nudge causes a behavioral change. And so the way we designed the experiment, really the main approach there is we have a treatment and a control group. So always one group gets the nudge and the other group does not. And so there's a baseline measurement. You can kind of see that they develop in parallel until the nudge is introduced. And so all the measurements always like rest on differences between the treatment and the control group. Yeah, for those that are a little bit more into the statistical literature, we apply differences methodology. So we try and account for changes over time and for shifts between the group. But really the main thing is that we did have this energy crisis, like the project started in late 2021, early 2022, depending on the pilot. And then it ran until summer 2023. So the idea is that basically the crisis should affect the treatment and the control group the same, right? We all have the same, we all read the same news, we have the same developments. So there's something to be said for this. And then the second challenge is a little bit the seasonality, which Paul also talked about, that there's a big pattern there. But the idea is the same, that basically the weather on a given day or the seasonality, it should not matter whether you're in the treatment or the control group. So this is how this would be addressed from a statistical perspective. But in general, I think this is very difficult to properly address. And I think like when you have larger data sets, when you really have these smart metadata, then we can apply different methods. We face new challenges, but I think the combination of having like different approaches to this can also lead to better information about how behavioral interventions can work. But yes, it's been a struggle.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, yeah, so we did I'm not the leader of the use case that was looking at nudges, but it was the same kind of methodology that Anne has referenced there. But from our perspective, I mean, if there is a silver lining to an energy crisis, is that we had motivated potential participants for our surveys and for our serious game. People were looking at what they could do to reduce their own energy consumption, which they mightn't have been doing if there wasn't so much coverage of an energy crisis, or there wasn't a perception at an individual consumer level of there being something that I can do. Because, you know, I talked about this in our presentation, that a lot of people feel like my individual single behavior is not going to change the planet. And why do I have to do everything? You know, I'm the one, oh, I need to do this. Well, what are governments doing? What are the energy providers doing? What are the retailers doing? Like, we've got lots of laws about even one of the things we came across in one of our studies was the whole energy appliance rating and the introduction of that in a phased scheme, let's say, across the EU was imperfectly managed, controlled, regulated. Like, they were supposed to have up-to-date energy labels on appliances, and we were going to high street retailers and they didn't have them. They had the old ones. So a lot of people didn't know what was the highest energy rating. Is it A or is it A+++? So there's a lot of frustration. People are like, I'm trying to do the best, but I can't even understand, like, which is better. I thought it was A. Oh, it's A+++. And so there's a lot of frustration from people, and they were trying. So we as scientists, we were tapping into that kind of frustration and that desire to learn something and to change their energy behavior. So yeah, there were challenges for some use cases. From other use cases, we had more potential participants. So there was a positive side to that. for some of our use cases.
Thank you. Maybe just one quick reaction. So thanks a lot. And I think the methodology is indeed very clear. And I'm looking forward to reading the result of both projects. I think also another part that's from Paul, what you mentioned is, of course, they want to do more because there is more coverage. So they really have an awareness of the importance of energy savings. The crucial aspect is also to keep that awareness once you have a more stable situation, when you have less coverage, where you have less urgency to do something. Because that's what we saw from the 2 oil shocks back in the 70s, is that there's a lot of things happening back then, and then energy consumption started rising again like nothing happened in the 80s. So it's trying to find that thin line between changing the behavior, but also making you understand that it's not linked to an emergency situation. It should be a new way of living. And also that could create some frustration, because some people also have a different aspect of using energy. So
yeah, and I mean, you're dead right, but unfortunately humans aren't rational and we behave like that. So it's up to all the stakeholders to holistically try and use, if there is a silver lining to this energy crisis, to try and use it to have sustained change over time, not just like a rebound effect that we've been seeing in some of our studies, and that it's lasting. So I think, yeah, it's not up to individual consumers to keep that and to sustain that. I think we need to think about what all stakeholders can do to achieve that. I don't know that will happen. I think a lot needs to change for that to happen. But yeah, share your perspective.
Very good. Yeah, this is a very interesting conversation. And exactly, we all know we're going into the into the gray with this, but I think really insightful and super helpful. I hope that those on the audience side thought this was also as insightful. Before we go, I just need to quickly let you know that the Y Project has a survey. It's a bit big, but if you have 15 minutes to kind of think based on what we were kind of listening to and your expertise, it would really help us out if you could provide some insights on this survey, which I'll put in the chat if I can. I will after a second. So basically it is to help us with our continuation of our work for the behavioral piece of our model, to understand what motivates citizens / consumers to make decisions as we change our heating system, and of course, like we mentioned already, to continue the renewable energy transition for it to be better and faster. So I now have access to this chat again, and I'll put that in there. But other than that, we reached the end. Unless there's any further questions, I just wanted to say to everybody, thanks so much for listening. I hope that you learned a lot, and thanks to all of our great projects, presenters, and our panelists. Really great job, and I think that this is a difficult, confusing, complex conversation, but we are getting somewhere, and it's really exciting to have you all here today. So thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you so
Nice
much.
Thank
discussion.
you.
All right.
Thank you.
Have a nice afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.